No,
No.
I don't think so.
No.
And I hope not, too. Some people think that they can actually track us. They have a way of just knowing us as an individual just by DNA, that there's some kind of a way of sensing the molecules and the way they're combined, that they can track you just by knowing, you know, having a record of who you are to start with. But, you know, that would be some pretty sophisticated technology. No, there's an error on my judgment. I tried to make that really clear. I very unexpectedly got close, jumped up when they were actually trying to move away, and I just, you know, somehow was able to bypass their efforts to have this avoid this having happened. And so, you know, then they were forced to fix my mistake, not theirs. Yeah, there was a big pile of logs here, and I jumped for cover. The nearest cover was forward, but I went into a crouch at the same time. So when I stood up to run away, that brought me closest to the surface of this craft. Now, even the UFO skeptic guy, he wrote a whole paper talking about how when aircraft fly through the air, that the air passing over the hull of the airplane, it builds up charges in the millions of volts. Now, what he was trying to do was trying to explain sightings by pilots by saying that these electrical charges would somehow break off of the craft and fly around them and make people think they were seeing a UFO. And so a lot of physicists and other scientists thought his theory was totally bogus, pretty unscientific. But he did verify the idea that a craft moving at very high speeds through the atmosphere can develop very high voltages in the surface. So that could have been what was happening with this craft that I got too close to. Or it could have been, you know, a side effect of the propulsion system that they were firing up to go away, and that, you know, I just got too close to that. Or maybe they were actually conducting some kind of a agricultural experiment on the trees there, and I just got in the crossfire of that.
So you felt the ship was kind of energizing and wobbling, about ready to take off?
Yeah.
So when you woke up, you felt like you had an axe in your head and you felt like your skin was burnt, is that right? Mm-hmm. So that was probably from the voltage, from the anti-gravity.
They had revived me enough to where, you know, if it was like cardiac arrest or something like that, they got that much of it fixed but didn't know how to fix the rest of the damage. So they turned me over to somebody that was probably more familiar with human physiology and maybe had better equipment in that regard to finish the job.
Do you think you actually went up in the anti-gravity beam, or do you think they came down to get you?
I don't know. You know, it could have been. They could have actually. Some people think they just teleported me, just dematerialized me, took me somewhere else.
So at what point did your other witnesses leave? They didn't see what happened to you?
No, they didn't see it. Just as soon as it hit me and they thought I was killed, that's when they took off.
They took off.
So they didn't want to get done.
And then what time factor was it before they came back to look for you?
They said it was like 5 minutes before they just got a grip, you know, on themselves and turned around and came back. They said they, you know, pretty much almost immediately realized that they were going to have to try to rescue me. Just on the faint hope that I survived that blast.
And then they were possible suspects for your murder, is that right?
That's right.
And so were they held in detention, or what happened?
No, they didn't actually arrest them, but they figured when they went in for those lie detector tests, it was being given in the courthouse, jailhouse, sheriff's office. It was all in one building, and that's where they gave the tests. And they said they figured if anything went wrong with these tests, that they weren't leaving there. They were going straight to jail.
But they all passed.
And they passed. So they were extremely relieved about that, because they had been a lot of murmuring about how they were going to try to just use the tests as a as an excuse to hang him for murder, just as a way to cover the whole thing up. So they were untrusting. They were thinking that they were going to try to make him look like they had killed me, so that they could have an excuse to arrest him. But
And did
it
they
was
call
on
in
the
the
up and
FBI
up,
as well?
and the
or
testing was fair, and they
Yeah.
passed.
Did they call in the FBI on this case?
It makes me wonder if there wasn't some other federal agencies involved. The Sheriff Gillespie was interviewed for Australian 60 Minutes, and he was much more believing in his statements for something that was going to be shown out of the country. And, you know, he comes off as a skeptic whenever he can with American media. But I've gotten emails from his relatives and close friends that say privately he's much more believing. He just doesn't want that known publicly. Plus, you know, him and the other lawmen that were rolled into the James Garner character, you know, he was such a Western icon. You know, he played a sheriff and a hero in so many things that for James Garner to play the part of a skeptic, the local lawmen want to identify with that. But, you know, I'm trying to get through to them that privately James Garner was believing. I mean, you know, outside of the character he was playing, that in real life he said he believed us.
Are you going to do a remake, a feature film?
We're working on it.
So David Wilcox, who's going to be at the Joshua Tree event, he'd be the one to connect with. Because
Well, there's a lot of people who have expressed an interest, and I was approached by a very large production company. They're the ones that made the TV miniseries Game of Thrones. That's the most expensive miniseries in the history of television. And I thought, that's cool. They would have the power to do it right. But when I started saying, I want to tell it how it really happened, and I want to communicate my current understanding on this, they lost interest. They, you know, I could tell, had the idea of making the super horror story, you know, and they said,
make it Hollywood style.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Just a moment.
you know,
Could we have a question from the
we might get back with them. It's just,
today you mentioned that previously before the incident there were animal mutilations around that area.
yeah.
I guess I have two questions. Was there also sightings of UFOs before your incident, and has there been many afterwards?
Yes. Yes to all three of those. And in the Travis film that has been released recently, Sheriff Gillespie acknowledges on camera that they had looked into the Apache County cattle mutilations in connection with this, and that there were reports in the newspapers about that. And what was the other part of the question?
Sorry, and including UFO sightings previously
Yeah.
before your incident?
And in the sheriff's files, some people reported directly to them that they were camping, hunting, or fishing in that area at that time and saw the craft come over. So, you know, they had that corroboration from those witnesses at that time. And I've had a number of people come to me over the years that saying, yeah, I was out there then and I saw it too. So, as a matter of fact, here, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I got pulled over there by Star Valley, and the officer was acting really nervous, like he thought I was going to shoot him or something. Do you have a firearm in the vehicle? I've never been asked that question before. And I go, well, yeah. He says, okay, stand right here. And he's acting so scared. The first time in my life I said, all right, you know that movie Fire in the Sky? That's me. And then he relaxed. You know, then he started telling me, you know, I was up in that area and I saw, you know, 3 different things, you know, 3 different sightings. You know, so that I kind of had an intuitive feeling that he just needed to be reassured that I wasn't some, because you know there'd been all this anti-police stuff in the media right then, and so they were feeling unjustly despised in their view in the public mind. Well, not on the craft, but little glimmers of memories that came back. They're just little fragments that don't really tell a story by themselves. So I'm still trying to piece it together, make some sense out of that. Yeah, there's things that I haven't talked about because I've tried to stick to the things that I can document, and otherwise it's just a claim. And to realize some of these things so long after the fact, I don't want people thinking it's some kind of an embellishment, but it's as real as anything, to me. And some of them really freaks people out, even my own family. So it's a good idea not to talk about those things.
Given we're a UFO group,
Yeah.
would you consider that we're all open-minded?
And this is on film.
I wanted to turn it off.
Didn't require a coin. You can pick up the receiver, dial O, and you get the operator. And that was Hollywood. I wasn't naked. They always got to have the nude scene. They had a big nude scene. They had the actor coming up upon this couple in a car getting busy, and they're naked and he's naked, and they start screaming and he starts screaming, and the crew said it was really dreadful, and so they edited that out, and I'm thankful for that. But I guess the showing the actor as naked in the phone booth is kind of a metaphor for the feeling of scrutiny that I had, people looking into every little thing of my life, and blowing everything out of proportion. I saw no other sign of humans. Now, in the movie, they made there was decomposing bodies in there and that kind of stuff, but no, I saw no other sign of other abductees, quote unquote. Oh yeah, they consulted with me, but then when I would say things, saying I wish you don't do it this way or that way, then they just, it was kind of like a pat on the head and run along now. Let the grown-ups do what they're doing here. So they didn't want to listen to me beyond a certain point. And that was true even with Tracy Torme, the screenwriter. He tried to defend his take on things, and he wound up walking off the set. And there were some minor dialogue revisions after he left because they were doing things he didn't like. But they did allow me to come to the set, spend a week up there watching what was going on, but they were not going to entertain my suggestions too much. I actually wrote up a little scene that I would like to have had them included, but that reflected reality. Sheriff Gillespie told the crew that night about his own sighting. And so I wanted to put that into the movie, and so I wrote up how that would fit. And they didn't want that at all. They wanted him as a total skeptic. I wanted to have that scene, which actually occurred before the incident, at least occur at the end of the movie, to where, he sees this light and you see his patrol car go off over there, and it ends with, what happens with him seeing this thing. But I have an interview with Dwayne Smith that I recorded on the phone because he had kind of disappeared. And I had lost touch with him from about the time the movie had come out. I did some interviews with him on the phone. And so couldn't find him. I had a former police officer friend of mine that lived in Oklahoma where I last heard that Dwayne Smith was living. And so he had a friend who was a private detective that tracked Dwayne down. And so I got him on the phone and I said, I'd like to have you come out and talk with me. And he said, yeah, I will. He says, my teeth are looking really bad right now. I don't want to go on camera. But yeah, we'll do that, But Thanksgiving before last, he went to bed and didn't wake up. So he had a heart attack. So I was very fortunate that I recorded that interview and finally located that tape recently, and I was going to see if Jennifer wanted to work that into her Travis film. No, the director came to Snowflake and looked around, but it was winter. There were no leaves on the trees, and it just wasn't as pretty as it is in the summer months. And so he didn't want to film there. And there were other reasons. It was just, from a practical standpoint, easier to, in the location there in Oregon, where they could just go right up the freeway out of LA and transport all those people, equipment, and everything into an area that they thought looked similar. I have been held accountable, accused of being responsible for the fictionalizations and even for them not filming in Snowflake, but all that was out of my hands, you know. That's not the way it works. Hollywood's not going to put somebody like me in charge of their multi-million-dollar investment. So, you know, even prominent writers, you know, Michael Crichton, Stephen King, always got into major disputes with Hollywood and wound up walking off the set and just throwing up their hands because Hollywood's going to do what they're going to do. So it's not my fault. And I wrote letters. I tried to get them to stick to the real story, and I was almost got myself barred from the set permanently. It was only Joe Wazan who finally arranged for me to come, not Robert Lieberman. Robert Lieberman was the director, but man, that guy had an ego like you would not believe. It was incredible. When we went up to look at the site, there was some snow drifts across the road, and we got stuck in one of them. We didn't get all the way to the site, and so we dug and dug and dug and got you know, everybody that was there was digging the vehicle out. And then when we got done, Robert Lieberman says, "Well, that's it. We're going to head back. I got us out twice, and I don't want to make it a third time." You know, what all that digging the rest of us did had nothing to do with us getting unstuck. But that was typical of the kind of stuff that he would say that had people just, you know, wondering about him. I don't know. I guess it was just a job to him, but
So it ends up not being.
he didn't have any history in the subject or anything like that. Well, that would just be my opinion, but you know, the feeling there is that people have sort of, I guess you call it the death of outrage. You know, that that there was a big expose way back 10, 15 years ago when they discovered that certain real prominent journalists were on the CIA payroll, and this was considered a scandalous compromise of journalistic integrity. But now it's pretty much assumed that the government is controlling the media to the point where, you know, people have given up on that as a reliable source. You know, the approval rate of Congress is at an all-time low. Well, they fail to mention the approval rate of the media, you know, is really, really low too. People don't trust the media, and they've earned it. That's the reason alternative sources like the internet have become to be more relied on. Back in the day when you had three major networks, three anchors, Walter Cronkite and the other two, and he was the most trusted man in America. If he said it, that's the way it was. Now you have all these scandals where, you know, these mainstream journalists, the big anchors, are having been exposed for made-up stories to enhance their careers. But, you know, business as usual. And people are willing to put up with it because they're not even relying on the media anymore. relying on other kinds of sources like the internet, which can be just as deceptive. You don't think that the government's going to get in there and create stories or create. They got it down to a science. They know how to manipulate, you know. They do research about how to do this, and they refine the techniques. They are definitely manipulating the public across the globe.
Well, I believe people are still maintaining their rage on that aspect as well.
On what?
On all the bailouts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's just, you know, so corrupt. It's just beyond belief, you know. But, yeah, it's just, there's just so many things that are just over the top again and again. I think people have outrage fatigue, you know.
Yeah.
And it's a sad thing, but, you know, what can you do? Wake people up?
I only read today that they, independent labs and that have just discovered that in Coca-Cola and a lot of the Kellogg's products, that they've got nanoparticles within the food and within the drink. They're
Really?
saying it goes inside with the chemtrails and all that type of stuff now, and they say, what is that, just a button to press?
Yeah,
And that's proven fact, right?
they've developed these techniques, you know, and even things like some of these mass shootings. There's a lot of evidence that this is being manipulated. They create this. The CIA has spent millions of dollars developing chemicals that will cause certain psychological reactions. They know what chemical will create a kill frenzy. And there's been movies made about that. And there's evidence that a lot of these shooters were being given prescription drugs that actually caused what they've done.
All the actors from Sandy Hook.
Those kinds of things, yeah.
Yeah.
And with the idea that to disarm the public by just saying, see, we have to get rid of guns, instead of, you know, pointing to the real problem there, that they made these people insane.
That's quite funny there, because Russia now has just turned around and said to their people, go and arm yourself. You're allowed to arm yourself now for protection,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of like a slap in the face to your government,
Yeah.
and a well-deserved one,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't mind me saying. Yeah, so that's a good thing, because trying to take the guns off you, because even Russia and China's turned around to your people and said, don't ever give up your guns. The minute you do that, so that's when you're gone.
Because
We're all gone, I suppose.
then they can do what they want. And,
That's
you know, even if people are our age, what are they going to do about it, you know? And, you know, it's not with the idea that you're going to take up arms against the government and actually do anything. It's just puts teeth in their words, you know? We don't like this anymore, and they know better than to push it beyond a certain point. It's never going to actually happen. It's just the final check on the excesses of government. Absolutely. The antidote to negative is positive. So, you know, you got to just get out there and try to, you know, drop that pebble in the pond and send those ripples out, and it all adds up over time.
This is maybe what we're doing here tonight.
Yeah.
Yes.
In other venues like this. That, as you say, the ripple effect.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder how much of this evil alien stuff is inserted propaganda.
Well,
And a lot of people
exactly.
point to
I don't
Hollywood
know
and their
how many
fixation on the invading monster thing as being controlled media.
Your good friend James
Yes,
Gillett,
exactly, that's where I think
he's
humans are
always on that
always
positive line, and he's always saying keep away from the negative side,
Yeah.
and he's in full contact, as you know.
Hmm.
Who's this?
James Gillett.
Yeah, it's a ranch up in the northwest that where there's a lot of sightings.
Have you been there, Travis?
No, I haven't been there. I do think that they've improved their attitude. There seems to be a little remnants of that. Well, you got to make the little chuckle at the end, make a joke about little green men. But more and more you'll see, them just dispense with that. And I think part of it is they get feedback from people. And people say, stop that. And that's really the best way to change that attitude, is for them to realize that they damage their own credibility doing that. Well, there's an episode with Larry King on there, and Dan Aykroyd's on there, and Stephen Hawking. And Dan's saying, there's all kinds of good, solid evidence, and he kept referring to the Travis Walton case. And so Larry King turns to Stephen Hawking and says, well, what do you think? And he says, I don't think there's anything to this, except perhaps in the case of the state of Arizona. And so I couldn't really figure out whether he was joking or not. He may have been referring to my case, because Dan Aykroyd kept bringing it up, or he may have been just making a joke about the illegal alien border problem coming up from Mexico. So you can go on YouTube and look at it. You decide whether what he was joking about. But it's there's been a shift in the way journalists treat it. They had this famous astronomer. It's no longer Carl Sagan. He's no longer with us. But I can't remember his name. It's a black guy, and he treated it seriously. And he said, "Well, Travis hasn't really provided me absolute proof that it happened," and that's a problem with a lot of the skeptics. They keep acting like failure to prove is itself disproof. And that's not good science. That's not the way science does. You have to prove that something isn't true before you say it isn't true. But they act like if you fail to prove it, that's the same as proving that it didn't happen. And it's not that way at all. And the corollary is in the criminal justice system. You can go into court and have a trial about whether someone committed a particular crime, and they can be found not guilty, but that is not the equivalent of being found innocent. Because not guilty means they just didn't have sufficient evidence to prove guilt. It says nothing about whether you're actually innocent or not. But people just get this confused in their mind. It's not that simple. And so very often, if a naysayer is trying to discredit something on television, they'll say something like that, there's no evidence, or there are no studies. And they'll very often say this when there's plenty of studies and plenty of evidence. And that's something that Stanton Friedman is very good at catching them at. They'll say there are no studies, and he says, oh yeah, how about this, this, and this, and he can just blow them out of the water. But if you don't hear the other side, and you hear that, you think, oh, well, they made the good case. But the claim that there's no evidence is just really overworked. And very often there's good evidence to the contrary.
Just on that point, if I could do, I had a discussion with a member of the media on radio about the point of proof. And I said, you raised the point of the microwave oven. I said, microwaves have been around since the beginning of the universe, 13.6 billion years. And it wasn't until somebody actually invented some device that measured microwaves that they became provable. Mm-hmm. So, and I said, that's the same thing with UFOs. If we could invent a device that would prove it, then it would be the same thing. Mm-hmm. But I said, oh, no, that's not the same thing. I said, well, yes, it's exactly the same thing. Microwaves exist, but it took a device to prove it, but we don't have that device to prove it.
It's like we have to keep learning the same lesson over and over and over again. Stan Friedman wrote a book called Science Was Wrong, and it's full of all these examples. And one that he didn't have in there was Lord Kelvin saying that mankind would never be able to travel faster than 60 miles an hour because all the air would be sucked out and you would suffocate and die. So we just can't go any faster than that. And this is a, top scientist of his day. And again, solemn pronouncements from the experts about what's impossible.
Yes.
Be careful when you say it's impossible.
Can I ask a question? Recently, Jaime Mason had an event in Mexico about the Mexican alien slides, supposedly the Kodachrome slides. Did you hear about it?
Yeah, I did.
What did you think of that?
Well, Richard Dolan went online and he had a real rant against the people who came out and were attacking the whole idea without having listened to the testimony of the scientists involved. And I went on there and agreed with him that, to characterize good research, you got to actually look at the evidence first. I said, I'm not making any judgment one way or the other on whether these slides actually represent what they're, reputed to represent. But you certainly do have to look at the testimony of these scientists before you go jumping out there and expressing these hard and fast opinions as if they were fact. So who knows what the case is with those slides, and they probably do have certain problems with the reliability from what I've heard since then. But the idea of jumping out there and saying it's this, and this when they don't know that, they haven't even listened to the analysis from the experts. Yeah, this November 5th, 6th, and 7th, we're having the 40th annual anniversary conference. We've got a number of prominent speakers. Lee Spiegel is the UFO editor at the Huffington Post. He'll be speaking there. David Childress will be speaking on the ancient aliens aspect of it. Lynn Katai will be talking about the Phoenix Lights. Number of other speakers, Ruben Uriarte and Nori Torres, are going to talk about the cowboys and aliens, pre-technology sorts of reports in the American Southwest. And got quite a lineup of speakers and some celebrity guests that haven't confirmed yet, so I won't give their names, but it could be real interesting if their schedules allow them to attend. We'll have a sky watch where we actually go to the site, and I'll go with you. Last time we went at night, and so I think this time we'll just, end it at the time that the incident happened, which is just after sunset, but not total dark. But we will have a sky watch too, but we'll probably have that closer to Heber because people got so cold last time that we'll have it near the venue, the hall where we'll be speaking, where people can stay warm and comfortable and still. And Ben Hansen will be conducting the Skywatch with some really great equipment, and so it's shaping up to be an exceptional conference, even better than our trial run last November. And I might add, for more information, go to the website that's devoted just to the site, which is skyfiresummit.com.
Thank you.
Thank you.